Okay, so today we're gonna tie up loose ends. Okay, first loose end we're gonna tie up is actually on something we did that we thought we already tied up, which is the Rav move. So this is in Hilchos Torah Hey Yod Aleph. Harav Muvhak Shivratza Limchol Al Kavodo B'chol Dvarim Ha'elu O Ve'echa Mehen L'chol Tamid Ve'echa Mehen Harshus Biado. So Rav Muvhak, the main Rav, wants to forego his kavod on all of these things or on one of them. To all of his talmidim or on one of them, he has the right to do so. Ve'afal Pi Shemachal, and even though he forgoes his kavod, Chayav Hatamid Lahadro, the student is obligated to glorify him, which we'll read about in the next Perek. Afilu B'shah Shemachal, even when he is pardoned it. So what we did last time, we went to the Gemara that's the source of this, where we found a machlokess. Okay, so let's just review the Gemara because this I got updates on this. So the Gemara is in Kiddushin Lamed Beis Amud Aleph at the very bottom, where you have a machlokess on whether a Rav has the right to be mochel on his kavod. So you have Amar Rav Yitzchak Bar Shela, Amar Rav Matana, Amar Rav Chista, Ha'av Shemachal Al Kavodo Kavodo Machol, Ha'Rav Shemachal Al Kavodo Ein Kavodo Machol. So Rav Yitzchak Bar Shela says, a father who wants to forego his kavod, his honor is forgiven. But a Rav who wants to be mochel his kavod is not mochel. So then Rav Yosef objects. Rav Yosef Amar Afilu Harav Shemachal Kavodo Kavodo Machol. Shneamar Varashem Holech Lifnehem Yomam. So he came back with the Yomam comeback. Okay. He says even a Rav who wants to be mochel on his kavod is forgiven. As it says, Hashem walked in front of them by day, which means that Hashem forsook. No, that's also different. Whatever. He gave up. He was mochel on his kavod by like leading us instead of us leading him. Right, so then Rava objects. Amar Rava, Hachi Hashta, is this really true? Hasam HaKadosh Baruch Hu Alma Dilehu B'Torah Dilehi Machal Likare. There, in the case of Bnei Israel, it is God's world and God's Torah, and he could be mochel on his kavod. Next page, Hacha Torah Dilehi. Here is the Torah his, and Rashi says Bitmiya. He says the kavod tali b'Torah. The kavod is all for the Torah. Is dependent on Torah. Ein yachol limchol al kavod Torah shehi shal kadosh baruch hu, and he cannot forgive the kavod Torah which belongs to God. But then Hadar Amar Rava went back and said, "In Torah dilehi, yes, it is his Torah. Dichsiv, as it is written, uvasora so yehege yomam v'layla." Rashi, Ki'im b'Torah Hashem chefzo, uvasora so yehege, says in Tehillim 1:2, that only in the Torah of Hashem is his desire, and in his Torah he thinks day and night. He b'tzchila he nikras Torah Hashem. In the beginning, it's called the Torah of Hashem. Umishalamda v'garsa he nikras Torah so. And once he learns it and literally pounds it, but like masters the text, is what we said, then it's called his Torah. Okay, so we wanted to define the machlokess between Rav Yitzchak Bar Shelas, Rav Yosef Bar Shelas, Rav Yitzchak Bar Shelas, and Rav Yosef, or the Havmina Maskana and Rava, right? So we developed an approach that I wanted to say. I was hoping Chayim would be able to repeat what he said, and you also had something, Yosef, at some point. We kind of like merge them at some point. But I wanted to say that the first position is easy, right? You only honor the Rav because of kavod HaTorah, and it's not the Rav's Torah. So just like you honor Sefer Torah because of kavod HaTorah, not kavod ha-parchment and ink, it's with the Torah that it represents, so too with this person who represents Torah. So that's the easy one. The other position seems to hold that it does belong to the guy. And we said, what does that mean? So I theorize that each person has a unique approach to Torah, that is impacted upon by his own psyche and Tselem Elokim, and that's really what you're giving kavod to. But we didn't really work it out. So on Friday night, I went to Rav Pesach's house for Shabbos dinner, and I asked him what his thoughts were on again the questions on the second shita. What's the idea that the kavod belongs to you? So he said, and I'm not quoting him verbatim because we talked about it for a while. So this is the formulation I remember, that you're really recognizing the impact that the Torah has had on the person. So it does trace back to kavod Torah, but insofar as it impacts this person. And I think that was one of my second approaches I said on Thursday, which is the material dimension of Torah. In the abstract, ideas of Torah have nothing to do with you and me. It's just the chachma of Torah in abstract. But chachmas of Torah as embodied in a person, then like that's going to be unique to each and every individual. Okay, so that's what I remember from Pesach. But then I was looking into it some more, and I found an Iggros Moshe. And I know this is our second time we've gone into Iggros Moshe in the last like 2 months. But we're not going to do the whole thing unless people are interested. But the first paragraph of this Iggros Moshe, in fact, it's in the middle of the Iggros Moshe. But first paragraph that I cited here, he gives what I think is Rav Pesach's svara, or very close to it. So he says like this. And I don't know the larger context. This is a very long shuva, so I only pulled out the one part that was relevant. Hold on just 1 second here. Okay. So he says, so he's talking about, I think, kavod of Torah in general and kavod of Kohanim. But then he says like this. He's topic kavod Talmidei Chachamim, Torah. So there's a doubt whether regarding the obligation of honoring Talmidei Chachamim, the Torah obligates us in. Oh, by the way, this is another reason why I wanted to do this, because even though this is not unique to Rambam, we will be going in the next Perek into the sugya of kavod Talmidei Chachamim in general, and he universalizes this. He says this is not about a Rav particularly. This is about kavod of Chachamim in general. So he says, "Im hakavod hu lahaTorah," is the kavod for the Torah. Shekamoshe b'Torah ksuva al sefer tzarich litain la kavod ka chiva Torah litain kavod lahaTorah sheba adam shalamda. So is the kavod for the Torah? Namely, that in the same way as the Torah that's written in the Sefer, you need to give it honor. So too, you need to give honor for the Torah that is in the person. Okay. But you're not honoring the person. Okay, this is the first shita. Oh, or do you say the hakavod chiyava haTorah litain laha'adam shehisig ba'amalo b'kocho uvekishronusav Now, just forewarning here, R Moshe is going to say this in different ways several times. So if it's not clear now, it'll get clearer. He says, or is the honor for the Torah is the honor for that the Torah obligates to give to a person his acquisition through his toiling and his capacities and his perfections, or his we didn't have good for kishronos, his talents. That God gave him regarding the Chachmas Torah, velo lahaTorah shebo, not for the Torah that is in him. Delo nechshav zeh be'en kmo b'ksuva al sefer, because this is not visible as it is in what's written on the Sefer Torah. Rak laha'adam shenizgadel kol kach shehisig Chachmas Torah. So rather, it's for the person who has developed so much in the Chachmas Torah. Hechshivu Torah. The Torah was machshiv him, made him prominent that you should give him kavod. Okay, so in other words, like this: are you on? So again, this is similar to Rav Pesach's and similar to mine, all in different ways. But are you honoring the Chacham for the Torah that he embodies, so that he reflects that is in him? Just like with the Sefer Torah, then you're honoring the Sefer for the Torah that's in it. Or do we say that no, since it's not really visible, you're honoring him for the development that he has had through his amelus b'Torah, through his toiling in Torah. Okay. Now, if you think to yourself at this point, oh, Rav Moshe doesn't mean that seriously. Okay, you'll see how seriously he means it because he gives a huge chiddush in a little while. Okay, but so now he's going to explain our machlokess. V'yish lefarsh zeh b'tam ha-salkadaitach to Rava. V'hahadar amar Rava. You can use this to explain the havmin and the maskana of Rava. קידושין daf lamed beis. Demitchilash amar Rava shaharav shmach al kvodo ein kavod avachol. First, he said that a Rav does not have the right to give up his kavod, to forego his kavod. V'dacha rayas Rav Yosef to kavodo machol mimasha kadosh baruch hu machil likare mishum to kadosh baruch hu alma dilehi v'tor dilehi machil likare. About tamid chachamim Torah lav dilehi. So first Rava thought that, God can be mochel his kavod because the world is his and the Torah is his, and therefore he can be mochel it. But the Talmid Chacham, the Torah is not his. Hayasavor shakavod hu lahaTorah shebo. At that point, Rava thought that the kavod is for the Torah that is in him. And so it's not his Torah, so he can't be mochel it. Ulahadar amar Rava, but then afterwards Rava said sheyachol limchol, that he can forego his kavod mishum dehaTorah dilehi, because the Torah belongs to him. Dichsiv, as it is written, uvasoraso yehege yomam v'layla. In his Torah he thinks day and night. Sover shehakavod hula adam al shehisig ba'amalo b'kocho uvekishronosav chachmas Torah v'nechshav machmazet Torah dilei v'yachol limchol. Fine. So he slots it into that machlokess. Okay. So any questions on that before we go on? Yeah.
So I guess what would be machlokess also is if we honor Rabbi. Like when I say Rabbi, I mean like it's a Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda.
Why?
Because we're at the point where we forgot like most of the Torah.
Yeah, but presumably anyone who has Torah in him would be honored for the first reason, and
I was saying he doesn't have Torah.
he didn't forget all of the Torah.
Okay, fine. I'm assuming he did forget.
If someone forgot all the Torah, then correct, you would not honor him according to the first Shita, right? Yeah, then he wouldn't.
If the Rabbi of Nijah story was like fully.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Okay. But now the question you might be asking yourself is, what exactly does this mean that, just to highlight the phrase here, when he says why you honor him according to the Maskana, Shinis Gadel, Rak Laha'adam, Shinis Gadel Kol Kach, B'chachmas Torah, Hechshiv, I can't read that. Hechshivtu Torah, V'chayva Shitna Kavod. Okay. So, R Moshe goes on. Now, I don't want to read all of this because he raises a question that I don't want to get entangled in right now. But actually, no, we have to. All right, if you don't mind, let's do one more paragraph. All right. B'hinei yesh lefarsh gam lahadar amar Rava shesover shal kavod hu laTorah shebo u'mashi yachol limchol hu mishum shenitna lo haTorah shalamad v'yischashav shelo b'kra dichsiv uvasura. So, okay, so we can now understand also not only Rava's position that you're honoring him for the Torah that he has attained in, right? Because the Torah was given to him that but rather you can understand the fact that he quotes this pasuk uvasura so, okay, his Torah, right? That was Rava's whole drasha. It's his Torah. Aval lo mashma kim yihad avodah zarah daf yotes. It's not mashma that way from what Rava himself says on daf yotes. Sh'amar Rava la'olam yilmad adam Torah v'achar kach yehege. There he says a person should always learn Torah and then afterwards contemplate. Okay, meaning like what we would say, get the facts and then get the svara. Okay, Darish zemima shebetchila nemar v'Torah Hashem v'hadar uvasora so yehege. At the beginning it says the Torah Hashem, and then afterwards it says uvasora so yehege. Shekvanas drashaso he shema shalomit kodem sheyehege lahavin ba'atzmo kol kach la'ayim b'talmudo l'damos milsa l'milsa l'hakshos u'l'taretz kapir rashi sham b'kavanas yehege. You know what? Let's look at the Gemara inside. Hold on. Avodah Zarah Yud Tes Amud Aleph. Sorry, my allergies are acting up. I'm just going to grab a tissue. Okay. Let's see. Where is this on? Oh, so this is a קידושין. I meant to go to Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah Yud Tes. And I don't know if it's Amud Aleph or on base. Torah so. Okay, so first he quotes our Gemara. Amar Rava b'tchila nikras al shemo v'kosh baruch hu l'b'sof nikras al shemo shneimar v'torah Hashem v'chatzot v'sorah so yehege yomam v'layla v'amar Rava la'olam yilman adam Torah v'achkach yehege shneimar v'sorah Hashem v'hadar v'sorah so yehege. So let's look at Rashi. Rashi. Yilmad Adam. So first you should learn. What does that mean? Me rabo, from your Rav. Achete girsas haTalmud upirusho shagura lo b'fiv. It's until the text of the Talmud of the learning and its explanation is secure in your mouth. Okay, so that's like, again, like I said, like getting the facts. And it's a little bit more than getting the facts. It's also getting the Masorah, getting your Rav's Torah, whatever that includes. The achar kach yege, then he should think. What does that mean? Ye ayin b'talmudo, he should analyze his learning, l'damos milsa l'milsa, to compare one matter to another, l'hakshos u'l'taretz, to give kushiyas and resolutions. Uvrishona lo yasakin, he should not do this at first. Shema yivatel, because maybe he'll be batal. V'harav lo yimtza lo kol sha'a, and he won't. His rav lo yimtza lo kol sha'a. His rav will not find him at all times. I don't know what that means. Also, after he has learned a lot, presumably this is like factual learning, or learning a lot, seeing a lot of Torah from your Rav, you'll be settled in your learning and you'll be able to answer for yourself that which is difficult. Okay, so it's a pun. Haskes means listen to Torah, Haskes u'shema. or like pay attention and listen, and saying has v'akach kses umaisina laha de Rava Hasan. Okay, I forgot what has means. Okay, fine. So the point is that Rava is saying first you should learn from your Rav, and then you should think into it. Now, what is the contradiction? So Rav Moshe is going to bring a contradiction between the two memories of Rava. So let's just see if we can get the contradiction. That he says, Shekavanas drasha, so he shema shalomid kodem sheyehege lahavin ba'atzmo, that which a person learns before he can analyze on his own, kolkach la'ayin b'tamuda l'damas milzal l'mizal l'hakros l'tarz kabir shirashisham b'kavanas yehege ela lomed hashmus me'rabo u'misfarim, but that which you learn from your Rav and Svarim, that is nikra Toras Hashem. That's called Toras Hashem. V'lo Torah, not his own Torah. Aval kashem mevin ba'atzmo, but once you understand it on your own, meaning what we call svara, you're asking and answering your own questions and making comparisons and resolving difficulties. Kvar mashalamad kolkach lahakros l'tarz l'damas milzal l'misa nikra Torah. Then it's called his Torah. V'hu k'damar Rava le'el mizeh, and that's what Rava said above. B'tchila nikras al shemo shel Kadosh Baruch Hu shtemar Toras Hashem levasof nikras al shemo shtemar v'toraso. Shemizeh nikar habir shel levasof nikras al shemo hu kishezacha lahavin ba'atzmo shehu hayehege shapirish Rashi. V'lechein shayach lidrosh shebitchila yilmot ana mirabo Toras Hashem shelo afshar likrozet Toraso. So, in other words, Torah so, you can only call something Torah so, according to the second drasha, when you are analyzing it with your own mind. But if you're just receiving it from your Rav, it's Torah Hashem still. Okay? Shehu tehe girsas Talmud upirusha shugura lo b'fi. That's just when you have like a mastery of the material. Only when you think about analyze the matters is it considered his Torah. That's when you're using all your faculties to understand it. Okay, now, so if you haven't seen the problem yet, what's the problem? So he says, delay. Okay, so he's saying like this: if the whole right that a person has to be mochel as kavod is because the Torah was given to him as a gift, so then you shouldn't make any distinction between the learning that you do when you master the factual material from your Rav and the learning that you do when you're analyzing it on your own. In other words, according to Rava's first drasha, seemingly any mastery of Torah makes it considered to be Torah so. But according to the second drasha, it's davka, the Torah that you have analyzed with your own mind, that you're coming up with your own chidushim with, and not the Torah that you just received from your Rav. Okay? So the nafkamina case would be, what would happen if you had a Talmid Chacham who only learned Torah from his Rav, but was not on the level of Svara yet? Would you honor him or not? That's his question. Okay? So ready for the radical chiddush? Rather, you need to say, we must say that only on account of the koach that he has to be machadish things on his own is it considered Torah so. That even though this certainly comes to him with divine assistance, I mean, in other words, even though Hashem is helping him do this, because Hashem gave him the ability to do this, the Torah still considers it to be his Torah. Because these are things that he was machadish on his own based on what he learned. And consequently, the kavod is for the fact that this guy attained this. Okay, this is a big chiddush. Only for a Talmid Chacham like this do you have a chiyuv of kavod.
As the only person who can think for themselves.
Yeah, who can think and analyze and come up with chidushim. Okay, and just to show you how far to take this. Okay, I just want to show you that I'm not making this up. If the chiyuv of kavod were for a Talmid Chacham who does not have this capacity, shadayin lo nikra Torah so, that it's still not called his Torah. Hayanimsa she'ika Talmid Chacham. Oh, this is an interesting argument. then you would turn out that there'd be a case of a Talmid Chacham who can't be mochel his kavod, who Talmid Chacham katan, which is an inferior Talmid Chacham, she'eno yodei l'damos milsa, who can't do svara. Val girsas a Talmud shalaman mirabo shagurla, but he knows the facts from his Rav. Shazen nechshav rak Torah Hashem. That would only be considered Torah Hashem. V'rak Talmid Chacham gadol yuchol limchol. Only a great Talmid Chacham would be able to be mochel his kavod. Shu mikeven shiachol l'damos milsa nechshav Torah. Because since he can compare one thing to another, then it's considered his Torah. Gama Torah shalaman mirabo. In addition to the Torah that he got from his Rebbe. Shlomis taber zeh. And this doesn't make sense, klal at all. Kavod hakatan chamor mi kavod hagadol. That the kavod for an inferior Talmud should be more stringent than the kavod of a greater Talmud. Af sheikatam dechol ki haygavna hayalo lafarish keven shu chidush gadol. In addition to the fact that if this were the case, it should have explained it. So he's saying like this. He's saying, if you were to say,
if he was right, somebody would have said this already because this is a thing that would need to be said.
Well, he's saying, let me just fill in the details. I think you're right in form, but he's saying that that if hold on, I just lost my train of thought about what his original question was. Yeah. So if the chiyuv of kavod for Talmid Chachamim were for people who just had a factual mastery, right? So then there'd be two problems. One is it would turn out that kavod for an inferior Talmid Chacham who didn't have the ability to analyze on his own would be more strict because it would be unmechilable, whereas only a Baal Svara would be mechilable. Okay, and secondly is what Yosef said, which is that if that were halachically true, someone should have said it, right? And the fact that no one says it and it doesn't make sense means that it's not the case. So Kamash Malan, you're only chayav to give kavod to a Talmid Chacham who can think on his own and do svara and do analysis. Okay, and here's where he states the biggest form of the chiddush. Okay, and therefore we must say that since the Gemara did not differentiate, and the satmo, and it left it off unqualified. Talmid Chacham yahol limchol, that Talmid Chacham can forego his kavod mishum de Torah dilehi, because it's his Torah. Hu mishum sheTalmid Chacham katan she'ino yodea l'damos milsa leka klal hachiyuv l'chabdo. Okay, is because a Talmid Chacham who is inferior, that he does not know how to do svara, there's no chiyuv to honor him. Af shema shalaman mirabo shaguralo, even though he knows what his Rav taught him. V'nimsa l'talmid chachamim shechayavim l'chavdam, that for Talmid Chacham who you're obligated to honor, leka shum chiluk, there's no chiluk within that. Dechulam yicholim limchol, that everyone is obligated to. Everyone and all of them are obligated to forego their kavod. Okay, wait, he hasn't stated it in the big way yet. Hold on, I mean this is pretty big, right? But he's going to state it in a big way. V'ayin b'Megillah daf chav ches. Oh, so when I mentioned this to Rav Pesach, and he quoted this Gemara also. Megillah daf chav ches. Oh, you want to hear one of the sickest Amoraic burns? Okay, in that I know of at least. Megillah chav ches, and I just have to see if it's Amud Aleph or Amud Beis. Yeah. Okay. Amud Beis. Hahu dahavi tani hilchasa sifra v'sifrei v'tosefta. Okay, so there was a guy who was a Tana. Now this is the kind of Tana that was like a memorizer, right? A walking encyclopedia, that he had memorized sifra and sifrei and tosefta. You see if Rashi says this. Yeah. Dahavi tani hilchasa shai shoneb mishnayos l'talmidim. No. Is there a Rashi here? It's possible there's no Rashi. Okay, I'll just read the Gemara itself. So there's a guy, so there's this guy who basically knew all these facts, right? Ushachiv, and he died. Asuv amru leila Rav Nachman lispede. They went to Rav Nachman and said, give him a hesped, please eulogize him. May the master eulogize him. Amar, hechi nispede. Haitzina demali sifri dechaser. Okay, so he's saying, how can I eulogize him? What should I say? That a basket full of books died? Ouch. Okay, so he's saying, hechi aspid. B'mai asafdenu, how, with what can I give you eulogy? Hai tzina mali sifre, this basket full of books. Ella, eno ella kisal shemiluhu svarim. He's only like a basket full of books, or as Rabbi Moskowitz would quote from some other Gemara, like a donkey carrying books, right? A guy who just knows a lot of facts. He says, "Ve'in mevin ma basocha." He doesn't understand what's in it. Af shona halachos. So he, even though he could teach halachos, he has not served Talmid Chachamim, which is a euphemism for learning svara, lilmod shiavinuhu tamei Mishnah, to teach him the conceptual understanding of the Mishnah, the reasons for the Mishnah. Maybe sometimes the Mishnah contradicts itself. But and you need to resolve it, like you have to say ha mani rav ploni. Or like you identify who the author of it is. He doesn't know what he's learning, right? So he's basically saying that a guy who just knows facts might be useful, but he's worthless as a basket full of books, because the basket doesn't understand the books, or the donkey doesn't understand the books. Okay, so sick bird. So what does Rav Moshe say? Oh, so he says that's what it means in Megillah. So he quotes the Gemara. Mishum shlo hevin lahachos. The Torah ulai raya misham shaleka chiyuv lachabdo katamid chachamim. So you see from there, this is a great raya actually, that Rav Nachman did not give him a eulogy, which means he did not honor him. So if you were chayav to give kavod to a Talmid Chacham who knew facts, then he should honor him, right? But the fact that he didn't give him a hesped means that he wasn't chayav to honor him. Yeah.
Like, is this just like he's not a Talmid Chacham?
Yeah, he's saying that he's not a Talmid Chacham. He's not a Talmid Chacham that you're chayav to honor, right? Like you could define someone as a Talmid Chacham in other circumstances.
Like if he could be called Talmid Chacham, I would think that, like, one of the questions will sound like, why is nobody mentioning this? Because they should be saying, oh, these Talmid Chacham you do, these Talmid Chacham you don't. But like, if you're just saying, oh, he doesn't count as Talmid Chacham, then
yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, yeah, that is smoother. That is what Rav Moshe was trying to avoid. Yeah. Okay. V'lachein hu raya ktsas shelahadar amarava habichiv hakavod l'tamid chachamim l'ha'adam atmo shezaka l'hasi chachmas Torah ba'amalo. Oh, so he circles back. So you see from here a raya that the chiyuv of kavod for Talmid Chachamim is for the man himself who was zocheh to apprehend the chachma of the Torah through his amal. So just to reflect back on what Rav Pesach said and what I said, which are different, I was saying that it has to do with his own unique slant that he puts onto it. So Rav Moshe is saying it has to do with his own like contributions, his own creative contributions to Torah, right? Not just the style of thinking, but the creative contributions. And what Rav Pesach said, we said that it's the impact of the Torah on him. It's dafka, the impact of the Torah on his conceptual mind, like his ability to be mechadesh, not just his ability to like recite stuff. Sorry, I know I said we would stop here, but I want to read. There's a place where he states this in a much more chidushi way. Oh yeah, I want to read this because we're Pesach quoted this also. Okay, I guess we're doing Rav Moshe today. I hope no one objects. Yesh l'tarch b'zeh hastira ma'ashe b'kiddushin daf lamed gimel amri. Let's look at this. Kiddushin lamed gimel. I actually haven't looked at this inside yet. Lamed gimel. Let's see if it's on all of the bays. Probably on the bays. Yeah. So Rav Pesach. This is the first Gemara that Rav Pesach mentioned to me when I brought this up. Ibaylahu. Okay, it was asked, Mahu lamun mipnei Sefer Torah. So what is the halacha regarding standing up in front of a Sefer Torah? Is there a Rashi on this? I assume this is just asking what's the halacha. Oh yeah, Mahu lamun. Mi mechayev lemekam olo. Are you obligated to stand up in front of a Sefer Torah or not? It's a basic question here. Ribi Chilkia, Ribi Simon, Ribi Elazar, Amri. So those Rebbeim said, Kal v'chomer mipnei lomdaha omdim mipnei lomdaha omdim mipaneha lo kol shekin. So it's a kal v'chomer. If you stand up before lomdaha, which was a great institute for women's learning that we closed down last year, if you're going to stand up because of those who learn it, mipaneha lo kol shekin, then shouldn't you stand up before it itself? Okay. So it's a koshkein, right? So you stand up for the people who learn the Torah. So if you have the entire Sefer Torah there, shouldn't you stand up for it? Okay, I think that's all we need to do. Let's go back to the R Moshe, and we'll do more if we need to. So what's the problem? Low code. Okay, Uvamakos daf chaf beis amarava kama tipsh. Okay, now we do. Sorry, this is the Gemara that Rapizak quoted. Makos daf chaf beis. Makos daf chaf beis. Let's see if it's on the beis. Tipesh. Tip. Yeah. My time. So this is talking about the fact that. Okay, my time. Okay, I'm not going to go to the Mishnah. Iksiv arba'in b'mispar haba amina arba'in b'minyana. Hasha diksiv b'mispar arba'in minyan. Shuhu sochim es ha'arba'im. Amarava. Okay, fine. All right, so let's just do the relevant part. Amarava. Kama tapshai shar tapshai. How many fools are there? I think. Shar inashi dekaimi mikami sefer Torah. Sorry, maybe there's one sentence. Can we get some punctuation? Kama tipshai shar inshi dekaimi mikami sefer Torah v'lo kaimi pnei gavra rabba. Okay, so how many foolish people are there who will stand up in front of a sefer Torah and not stand up in front of a great person? The ilu b'sefer Torah ksiv arba'im v'asu rabbanan b'tsaru chada. You see that in the sefer Torah is written 40 whiplashes, and the rabbanan came and they took away one. Okay, so you see that the rabbanan have a higher power than the Torah itself, so to speak. Okay, so let's see what R Moshe says about this.
If this is, I just guess myself going to divide and say one's top. I guess the real Talmud Chacham, the other person just memorize things.
Good question. I forgot if he says that. Okay, let's see. Yeah. It's a good guess. I thought he was going to ask.
Yeah, fine.
No, go ahead.
I guess I was going to ask a question that they realized I wish I actually said anything, guys.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what he says. Okay. Hari de Gavra Rabba Adif mi Sefer Torah. So you see that a Gavra Rabba is greater than a Sefer Torah, right? From that second statement of Makos. V'soser la kavachomer de קידושין. And that contradicts the kavachomer in קידושין, because the kavachomer in קידושין is saying, if you stand up for the guy, then koshkein you stand up for the Torah. So those are contradictory or opposite kavachomers. Or not opposite kavachomers. One of them is not a kavachomer. But mimanavshach, is the Torah greater or is the guy greater? If the Torah is greater, so then you can't fault people for standing up for the Torah and not standing up for the guy. And if you're faulting people for standing up for the Torah and not the guy, then how can you have a kal v'chomer that if you honor a Sefer Torah by standing, the koshkein a great person? Okay, so how do we answer this? V'ayin baran קידושין daf lamed gimel. We're not going to look at this inside. Shemak shezeh v'tiretz b'shnei pirushim. So the Ran answers this with two answers. V'adayin kasha af l'tirutzo. It's also still difficult according to his answers. Torah. Hari ika kra before us to start lemekam mikami tamid chachamim v'omrim al mitzvos Torah. Okay, so he's saying that it's difficult because why does Rava need to prove that you should stand up in front of a Talmid Chacham if there's an open pasuk that you stand up in front of the Talmid Chacham, right? That if you don't stand up in front of the Talmid Chacham, you're over a mitzvah to say. V'gam my time akra lehu rak tipshai harihim avaryanim she'ovrim al haseh. So why would you need a pasuk at all? These guys are idiots. They're over an aseh. Okay. So here's the point I wanted to get to. Okay, this is where he elaborates one more step on his finish. According to what I explained, Yish Farish B'derech Zo, Divadai ha'in shish amar Rava lo avru al ha'aseh. Vadai, the people that Rava was talking about when he called them idiots, are not over an aseh. V'hayu kaimi mikami gavra Rabba. They're standing up in front of a great man. Achim amdu lo mipnei chashivus hagavra Rabba ela mipnei haTorah shebo shechoshvin osam kesefer Torah haksuva al sefer. Okay, so he's saying when these people stand, Him amdu lo mipnei chashivus hagavra. They are not standing up because this is a great person, but rather because of the Torah that is in the person, which makes them considered like a Sefer Torah that is written on a Torah that's written on a Sefer, and not because of how great the person is in Chachmas Torah. L'zeh amar hu shehu tipshus. That's why he's saying it's tipshus. Gavra Rabba yesh lo chashivus mitzad shu machadish dvarim b'Torah b'chocho uv'kishronosav ayde limudo harav. That it's tipshus because the Gavra Rabba has chashivus because he's able to be mechadesh things through his own talents that he learned from his Rav. Not just because he has Torah in him, al sefer, that he learned from what is written on, like what's written on a sefer. Like we learned that they're mechadesh many things, like malchus, where they take away one of them. Therefore, the standing up needs to be because of the gavra rabba, not because of the sefer Torah that is in him. V'nimsa, consequently, this does not contradict the kavod chomer. Al kol panim, once you're standing up for a great person because of the chachmas Torah that he acquired through his own talents, all the more so you need to stand up in front of the Torah itself. But you're not standing up for the Gavra Rabbah because of the Torah that's in him, you're standing up because of his chidushim in Torah. This is the line I wanted to get to. This is relevant in halacha l'maisa. Shalachin ein mechuyavin lamon mipnei adam sheyodea kol haTorah shebichsav bal peh va'af gam miTorah shebal peh im ein mevin ledamos milsa kedei la'el. Okay, a guy has mastered all of Torah shebichsav and Torah shebal peh, but doesn't know how to engage in the analytical chidushim. We don't have to honor him at all. Okay, that's the Chiddush line I want to get you just to show how far Rav Moshe is going with this. Okay, but just now go back and answer to resolve his original question. So he's saying that the two Gemaras only contradict each other if you were to assume that you're standing up because of the Talmid Chacham as like a repository of Torah. So then you got a contradiction that you can't fault people for not standing up for the little Torah that's in this guy if they stand up for the big Torah in the Sefer. But if you say that the reason why you're honoring the guy is because of the Torah's impact on his mind, so then you can sustain the kavod chomer and you can say these guys are idiots for not standing up for him.
I think it was the first case was just the kavod chomer from the reasons for standing up to the other one, and the Makos case was just saying you're an idiot for not realizing the true reason you're standing up.
Oh, yes, that is also the case. Yeah, that you're not reasoning. Yeah, I mean that is what emerges from his analysis of the sugya, that these guys are idiots because they're not realizing, they're mistaking why they stand up for this guy. Right? They're falling out on the wrong side of the svara about the kavod tamid chachamim. Correct. Yeah, I was just playing it through the stira. Yeah. Might as well do this last paragraph because it's the last paragraph. Hayotze mizeh. So what emerges from this, Shalamaskanas Rava Rav Yosef to Talmid Chacham Yachol Limcho al Kavodo Habi Hakavod La'adam. According to both Rav Yosef and the Maskana of Rava, it turns out that a Talmid Chacham can be mochel as kavod because the kavod is for the person, like Rav Pesach said. V'lachin af Rav Yitzchak Bar Shela Amar Rav Matana Amar Rabbi Chistash Ein Harav Yachol Limcho al Kavodo Nami Mistaber Shelo Pligi Al Zeh. So you can even say it according to the first shita, who says you cannot be mochel your kavod, that they also don't argue on this. Rak shesabri shemikamacham eno yachol limchol ulai mishum shenikru malchi kediisa begitin daf samach beis umelech eno yachol limchol v'gam mistaber derak beravo machmirin. Okay, I don't know where he gets this from, and he kind of just throws it as a throwaway line at the end without going into depth. He says possibly even they agree with this. And the reason why they say that he cannot be mochel his kavod is because Talmidei Chachamim are called kings, and a king can't be mochel on his kavod. But according to that, we're only machmir on your Rav. So what emerges from all this is a huge idea in the way we're learning. Now, again, I don't want to say that the Rambam necessarily holds by this, but I do think it follows. I'll show you why. Okay, that it turns out that you're being mechabed a Talmid Chacham because of the unique firsthand creative thinking that he does, okay? And that's what Torah delay means. That means it's his Torah. Okay, so hold on just 1 second then. Could you then say, see what I'm trying to do? Okay, I'm gonna try and make a move. What do you think of this? Remember when we were first saying who is defined as your Rav Movhak? And I mentioned Rav Pesach Svara, that whoever is responsible for your ability to think in Svara, this fits in really nicely with that, right? Because that's the Rav who brings you into Olam Haba, and that's the Rav who's really differentiating you from a basket full of books and bringing you into the parsha of like making the Torah yours. So the Rav who makes the Torah yours, is really in other words, the whole institution of kavod Talmidei Chachamim is only in reference to Chachmas Torah of what Rambam calls Chachmas Talmud, but really is analytical ability to be machadesh things. Okay, so it would stand to reason that the Rav who teaches you Chachmas HaTalmud is the one who is your Rav Movhak, not Nikra and Mishnah. In other words, even though the Rambam didn't specify that, it does stand to reason that that's the case. That it's that we would not consider him your Rav if he just taught you Mikra and Mishnah. But if he teaches you Talmud, and again, by the way, just to be clear here, Talmud also means a conceptual analysis of the Psukim. Okay, according to the Rambam Shita.
Okay, so as anything the Rambam, I guess got his far from reading about the Rashash.
Yeah, exactly right. You mean the even Migash? Yeah. The Rimigash, the Rimigash. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that means he got his Derech Limud from him. Correct. Yeah. So if this is true, I mean, again, I would never have been so bold as to say this without R Moshe, but like R Moshe is very bold here, and he's even willing to say that everyone agrees to this. That this is not just that we paskin this way, but that all she does agree with this. Interesting. Yeah. And again, it's consistent with the Rambam. So we'll have to, as we read through the through the Perek Vav, we'll have to think if we can find any evidence for or against this theory. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, big day. Okay. All right. So let's now wrap. If there are any questions of that, we'll take it up. If not, we'll wrap up the last two halachos. Okay, so let's reread the last two halachos, which we read last time, but just we wanted to understand it a little bit better. Kashem shal talmidim chayavim b'chavod harav, kach harav tzarich lahabed es talmidav ulakarvan. Okay, so just as the talmidim are obligated in the honor of the Rav, so too the Rav needs to honor the talmidim and draw them close. So we said last time, we noted the difference between obligated and needs to, that apparently this is not midin, this is not midoraisa, midin, kavod Talmidei Chachamim, right? These are just your talmidim. And we said that ulakarvan could either mean bring them close to him or bring them close to Torah. And the Rambam did say in Hilchos coming to Matzah that bringing them close to Torah, but that's not a raya that's what he means here, but whatever. Okay. The tzarich adam lihi zahir. Kach amru chachamim yihi kavod talmidecha chaviv lecha k'shel chaverecha. The Rambam's girsa of this Mishnah in Avos says, "Let the kavod of your talmid be dear to you like the kavod of your fellow." Now, our girsa in the Mishnah says, "Chaviv lecha k'shelach," and I did check to see if the Rambam has commentary on this Mishnah, and he does not. So we're out of luck there. So our question there is, what is this idea of the kavod being chaviv to you? Saying that you need to do as much kavod, we clearly are not going to say, because a Rav is not obligated to be mechavid his talmidim with all the same kibudim, but he needs to treat the kibudim the same as he would for the kavod of his friend. So what does the chaviv mean? So we've seen chaviv, we talked about this a little bit last time, we've seen chaviv in several contexts. One is I think we even came up with a theory about this year, didn't we? In Hilchos Chanukah. Remember this? Mitzvah ner Chanukah, mitzvah chaviva hi ad me'od. I don't remember what we said, but
same. It's like as you mentioned, I remember something about that, but I forget.
Yeah, we even went through all instances of chaviv. Yeah, I'm not going to do that again. Don't worry. I'm actually not do that again. But I think what we said is, I know what we said. So the clearest case of chaviv was the not eating matzah on Erev Pesach, so that you enter into the chag with a taiva, right? So we said that it is cultivating an emotional attachment to the mitzvah. And by Ner Chanukah, we said that you need to be careful with it because it's a mitzvah chaviva. And I think we noted that almost sounds contradictory, because if it's chaviv, let me just I do want to make sure I'm quoting it right. Hold on. halachos. Oops. Yeah, I just don't know how I saved it, the file. If I saved it as Megillah v'Chanukah, yeah, here we go. So this is going to be halachos Chanukah or Megillah v'Chanukah Dalid towards the end. Dalid Yud Beis. Mitzvah ner Chanukah mitzvah chaviva hi ad ma'od v'tzarech adam li zahar ba. Right. So we said that sounds contradictory. If it's chaviv, so you shouldn't need to tell someone to be careful with it. Am I going to cushion ourselves into a corner? Yeah. So what do we say? Okay, maybe I can't remember our answer to that question, but I think what we said. Okay, maybe I'm only remembering the Tzarech Zahir Ba because we said that candles are expensive, and that it's not likely that people. It's very easy to sort of overlook because it's very like perfunctory type thing, you know. But what do we say about mitzvah chaviva? Okay, let's just run with this theory here. Okay, that chaviva means.
I think we said.
Yeah.
I think we said that chaviva is
that
people have
than I have. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I actually thought it was last year.
It could be last year.
Yeah, I think what we said was that people have like a natural like emotional affinity to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you know, like people like really like it, and it doesn't mean that they're not necessarily be like careful in making sure to follow it technically, but
right.
they have
Yeah, I hear that. I wonder if that's true. It's certainly true now. People love Hanukkah, but I wonder if back then.
I think for a very, very long time, the main symbol, at least for Judaism, was a menorah.
Correct. Right, but that would have been the menorah from the base of Mikdash, not Neros Hanukkah, which didn't even have a Chanukiah associated with it. Like we nowadays associate menorahs with Hanukkah, with like our Neros Hanukkah, but back then they didn't.
I think the association, at least with Jews, came maybe not. I think for the whole Hanukkah and Maccabees, so that's what the symbols.
Right, but the Neros Hanukkah that we light wouldn't be associated directly with that. That would be like the events of the Hanukkah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So maybe so let's just throw out one step: is that there is a tendency to treat your colleagues' kavod differently than the kavod of your talmidim. And I think the greatest unfortunate raya of this is if you've ever seen a high school teacher growl at a student for not respecting another teacher, but they oftentimes will not be so makpid when one student disrespects another student, and certainly not when a teacher disrespects a student, because they view their own colleagues as being in like one area of like kavod, and they view talmidim as being like their kavod is less important to them. And what this is saying is that their kavod should be as important to you as the kavod of your colleague, and you should cultivate that care and concern and affection for the kavod of your talmidim. Now, why is that? I can see two reasons. One is a utilitarian reason, that the more you care about the kavod of your talmid, the better Rav-Talmid relationship you're going to have, and the better it's going to be for the learning of you and for your talmid. It's a utilitarian thing. I mean, it's not just utilitarian, but I'm saying it has practical effects. The other is like a hakar satov type thing, a recognition that, like the Rambam says later on, it's really the Talmidim who provide the greatest chachma for their Rebbeim. And in order for the institution of Talmud Torah to perpetuate itself and to be successful, then you need Talmidim, and you need Talmidim to be treated with the kavod that they deserve for like being part of that institution. It'd be like if you, this is a bad analogy because I don't want to say that Talmidim are equal to custodians, but if the janitors, but like in school, like there would, when I taught it in high school, there would always be some students who would like treat the janitors like with disrespect. And you have to realize the janitors are not teaching classes, but they are keeping the building clean and functional for us to use for our purposes, for our purposes of higher education. So if you don't respect them and what they're doing, you're really not appreciating their role in the system. So appreciating the role of the Talmud in the system is something that you need to cultivate, by treating their kavod properly. Those are my two theories I was thinking. Okay. A person needs to be careful with his talmidim and to love them. So we didn't really define last time what it means to be careful with them and to love them. Love them, we said, sounds like a natural thing, because if they benefit you, in your chachma, then you're going to naturally love them. But then it sounds like he's saying tzarich la'ahavan. So it does sound like something that's in your control, So what does that mean? And what does the be careful with your talmidim mean? Does it just mean where did I read this anecdote? Is it on my computer? I know where it was. We read this. I read this last time from the Truman biography again. So I saw it. Let me just see here. Hold on. There's the other part of his anecdote that I did not read last time, I think. You just write Truman. I'll know what it is. Yeah, so he says that, here we go. In 1964, Eric Savarade, in a conversation with Mr. Truman, got on the same subject, and he quoted him saying, "What you don't understand is the power of a president to hurt." Savarade added, "An American president has the power to build, to set fateful events in motion, to destroy an enemy civilization, to win or lose a vast personal following. But the power of a president to hurt the feelings of another human being, this, I think, had scarcely occurred to me, and still less had it occurred to me that a president in office would have the time and the need to be aware of this particular power among so many others." Mr. Truman went on to observe that a word, a harsh glance, a peremptory motion by a president of the United States could so injure another man's pride that it would remain a scar on his emotional system all his life. Then Savarade recalled an episode that the president had also told me shortly after it happened in the late winter or spring of 1962. He had given a lecture at, I believe, the University of South Carolina, in any case at a college or university in Southern California, sorry. I said Carolina, I meant California. The lecture was on the subject he loved best, the Constitution and the presidency. During the question period, a boy got up and said, "Mr. President, what do you think of our local yokel?" He meant Pat Brown, then governor. Mr. Truman told the boy that he should be ashamed of himself, that to speak of the governor of a state in such a disrespectful way, even if he disagreed with him, was a shameful thing. The boy, close to tears, sat down. When the question period was over, Mr. Truman went to the boy and said that he hoped he would understand that what he had said had to do with the principle invoked and that he meant nothing personal. The boy said he did understand, and the two shook hands. Afterward, Mr. Truman went to the dean to ask him to send reports from time to time on the boy's progress in school. The dean said he would and had. I asked Mr. Truman if he had ever heard from the boy himself, and he said, "He's written me 2 or 3 times, and I've written back. He's doing well." Savarade said of the incident, "The simple point here is that Mr. Truman had instantly realized how a public scolding by a former president could mark and mar the boy's inner life and his standing in the community. I feel gratified to have heard the story. It has given me insight into the responsibilities of a president that I did not have, and it has immeasurably added to my own residue of memory about the man from Missouri." So you'll hear, and maybe you've even had experiences like this, of people who had one bad experience with a Rebbe or with a teacher that totally or almost totally turned them off to learning. I read, I don't know how many of you know Rabbi Pilachowski, but he recently wrote of an incident of a teacher who basically did this when he was in grade school or high school, and it almost completely turned him off to learning. And it stayed with him for so long that he actually went to the teacher decades later to confront the teacher, and the teacher was apologetic and saw what an effect it had. But one wrong move that a Rebbe makes, and I've had, as a high school teacher, I've had close brushes with this, where look, it's hard to be on all the time and to be sensitive to all the talmidim, but it's necessary, because one false move and you could totally ruin a student's relationship with Torah, or confidence in themselves, or all these other things. So maybe I'm projecting, but I think that's what I would say when if I just said that phrase, "Sarek Adam lihi zahir b'talmidav," and maybe ula ahavan is in that context, not ahava as in. Okay, maybe this answers my question. It's natural for a Rebbe to love his talmidim, right? Because they benefit him in this world and in the next. But what it means is that he should act towards them with love, like to nurture the bond, because that's going to be their connection to Torah itself. And that's why the Rambam has to say tzarech, because it's not clearly not just a natural thing that happens. Okay, last part. Um, the Chachamim said, I've learned much Torah from my friends, my peers, more than from my rabbis, and from my students more than all of them. And just as a little piece of kindling can ignite a big one, so too an inferior Talmud can sharpen the Rav till he brings forth from him through his questions wondrous chachma. So we said, why is this the case? So I can just tell you from experience that, and you probably had experience limited as well. I mean, more limited than me, just because I've had more experience, like years wise. When you have to teach something to someone who is on a lower level of knowledge than you have to know it inside out. You have to be able to put yourself in the framework, in beginner's mind, in the framework of a person who is not familiar with the knowledge, and then work your way up. So you have to know the knowledge much, much better than you would in order to convey it to your friend, and certainly much more than you would to be able to convey it, to like talk about it with your Rav, So that's why I found, and I think I could say this in this yeshiva, I mean, you'll have people who, a lot of Talmidei Chachamim in this yeshiva, and some of them are also teachers and some of them are not teachers, some of them are just like primarily Talmidei Chachamim. I found that the ones who are primarily Talmidei Chachamim and not teachers can communicate very effectively to other Chachamim, but are less effective in communicating to other people. But the ones who are teachers, and especially the ones who have taught in high school, and I'll remind you that both Rebbe and and Rabbi Moskowitz, and Rav Pesach also, and Rabbi Faith, these were high school teachers, and like the ones who have an experience of really breaking down an idea to its basic components and helping students develop, have to know the material way, way, way better than someone who is teaching it to someone who's more advanced. Yeah, the person who's teaching it to someone who's more advanced needs to be able to anticipate deeper and more complex questions. That's a different kind of depth, but you'll often find that that this is the case, that all it takes is one student to ask a very basic question that you might have even thought of it many times on your own, but when you hear it from them and you can't get away with giving the answers that are on your level of sophistication, and you really have to break it down or come up with a new answer, it leads to new directions. So I'm sure there's much more to be said on that, but I think this would be a good time to stop and to begin the next Perek tomorrow. Okay, have a good day.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think that's about that phenomenon.
Yeah.
I definitely had that when I was giving my chavurah last year, where I listened to shiur about the topics several times, and I thought about it a lot, and then we started discussing it, and I was like, oh, now that I'm thinking about, now that you asked that, I have much deeper insights.
Right. Yeah, good. I'm glad you went through that experience. All righty. Till next time.
Okay. Thank you.